Last summer, when we were in San Diego for Fine Woodworking Hands-On, everybody that we talked to said you have to stop and talk to Russ Filbeck. And they were right. Russ has been a lot of things in his life. A career Navyman, a woodworker, a woodworking teacher, a philanthropist. In this interview, Russ shares his life story with us, how he started woodworking, and how he has now come to help President Carter raise money for the Carter Foundation. Russ's story is incredible, and it's inspirational, and it's genuine. And I hope you enjoy listening to Russ as much as I did in this interview. So Russ, would you call yourself a chairmaker or a woodworking teacher? What would you...
That's hard to nail down.
Yeah. I came out swinging.
I love teaching.
Yeah.
And that's why I still teach privately here in my shop. And I totally enjoyed the 22 years I taught at Palomar College. But it's really hard to define me as one or the other, but certainly a woodworker. And my past several years, obviously, its passion has been for chair making.
When did you make your first chair?
1982. It was a Maloof rocker. I didn't bother to ask anybody if I should take another or learn how to make another chair first.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, that chair has a lot of warts.
Start simple.
It still is comfortable, and
do you still have it?
I do. That chair I made from black cherry that grew on my great-grandfather's farm, and his name was Jacob Filbeck.
Okay.
And so my youngest daughter named her youngest boy Jacob after him. And so I told her when he's old enough to go out on his own, I want that rocking chair to go to him. So 7 generations from Jacob Filbeck to Jacob Dolan. And so...
How did you come, where did you get the tree from?
In 1972, the tree was dozed out. It's back in Missouri.
Okay.
And it was dozed out to make room for a big electrical power line.
But at that point, you were in San Diego.
I was, but my dad knew about it, and he and my nephew went and rescued it from the burn pile and cut it into lumber. And 3 grandfather clocks were made. I made that rocking chair, some cradles that my dad made, and I've made a spoke shave from that tree for all the descendants of my great-grandfather. So they all have a piece of that tree.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they've got a nice functioning tool, but obviously most of them just have it as a keepsake.
Yeah, but it's a keepsake of their generations past and your work and something that you're known for, spoke shaves.
And I gave them a letter describing the events of that tree's life on my great-grandfather's farm and my dad harvesting it. And my dad's brother, my uncle, in his memoirs, talking about that tree, as a boy, he remembered seeing the blue jays walking around on the ground drunk.
Off of
the fermented fruit from that tree. And it's in his memoirs. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah. So anyway, woodworking, making shaker boxes and spoke shaves and turning on the lathe. So there's so many different facets.
So you had mentioned that your father made some cradles.
Yes.
So your father was a woodworker?
Well, he was a farmer, and so he did everything.
Yeah.
And he always said he was a jack of all trades and good at none, but he was really quite good at most everything he did, and had a brilliant engineering mind, even though he was didn't have any formal education beyond the 8th grade. And yeah, when he got that tree, that's when he bought his first table saw. He bought an Inca table saw, an Inca band saw, and an Inca planer joiner.
Is it genetic or something? I see Incas all over the place here.
So after he built those cradles and the grandfather clocks,
Oh, so your father built the grandfather clocks?
Yes. And my oldest daughter has the clock that he made for himself, and he had two more that were not quite finished, and I took them and finished them.
Okay.
And one of them went to my nephew that helped my dad rescue that tree from that burn pile.
Nice.
And I have the other one. So those three clocks are still in the family. And then once he had finished that, he said, I'm done. And he didn't do any more fine woodworking after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got his Inca equipment, and that's when I fell in love with the Inca tools. Yeah.
That's a pretty special story.
It is. And, you know, I'm grateful for it, because he left me some fine woodworking
Mm-hmm.
to look at what he did, and his choice of tools. The Swiss-made Inca machines were excellent.
Yeah.
And I still use them.
Was that your introduction into woodworking? Was through...
I had a high school class. Before I joined the Navy, I had one class in high school as a senior. And I just remember that fondly. Made a little, kind of a little table with a little hog trough bookshelf underneath of it for putting books in. And my older sister still has that.
Does your family not throw anything away?
No, farmers don't do that, because everything will have a use. Yeah, everything comes around to have a use.
Earlier you used a line that your father said, use it
up, wear it out, or do without.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And waste not, want not is another one, but Dad always liked the other one, use it up or wear it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you joined the Navy.
Yeah, in 1962, 5 days after graduating from high school. And
that put your woodworking on hold. And what did you was... You were a career Navyman, right?
I was career Navy, and 18 of that 23 years was in submarines. But I didn't immediately go to submarine duty. I initially went to a World War II cruiser, and I was a machinist mate, so I was in the engine rooms with the steam propulsion. And
were you, as a machinist mate, machining things? So you
that's a machinery repairman.
Okay.
Interesting that you make that connection, because I thought I was going to be a machinery operating lathes and mills, and
that sounds pretty nice.
It was, and I would love to have been a machinist.
Yeah,
but a machinist mate is the one that operates the steam turbines in an engine room on a steam propulsion ship. Okay. And I didn't realize that until I get to my machinist mate A school, and they start talking about steam and like. And so, too late.
Yeah.
So I was a machinist mate. And later on, I did learn to use lathes, and that was particularly important in submarine service, because you have a small lathe to manufacture parts if something breaks while you're submerged and deployed.
Because you got to fix it.
You have to fix things as you go. Yes.
Yeah. So while you're in the Navy, this brings up something that I notice over here. I've been putting things on what I thought was just a table, and we were eating a couple sandwiches a minute ago, and I realized that it was an old table saw.
Yeah, my table saw is the very first tool that I ever got. And that was immediately after, or very shortly after meeting my wife and getting married. I was on a submarine at that time, and a ballistic missile submarine home ported out of New London, Connecticut, or Groton. And when I went to Holy Loch, Scotland with that submarine, I got some beautiful little Scottish dolls with the tartan plaid costumes. and then went to Rota, Spain, and got the little Spanish dolls with the beautiful flamenco dancer costumes. And my wife wanted to be able to display those, and so she wanted some shelves. And so,
and little did she know.
Yeah, that started this whole thing. And so we went down to Sears, and I didn't really know what I was. I just knew I wanted a table saw, and I wanted to be able to make some dados. So I got the table saw and a dado set and a molding head attachment, and it all cost $250 for all of that.
This was what year?
68.
68. Okay.
Yeah. And so I used that to make that set of shelves, and it traveled with us when I got transferred from duty station to duty station. And I'd set it up and use it as a hobby. And I continued that until I retired from the Navy in 85. My hobby became more and more sophisticated, maybe. And I attribute it to Woodsmith magazine, because the engineering details of
there's
of that
always
editor. He was
mechanisms and what was the shop notes?
Shop notes followed.
Yep.
Yes, and so that was what I was so inspired by, the technical detail that he would have in his pieces. And so many of the things that are in my home are things that I built back in that time,
great,
while I was still on active duty.
What's it like trying to woodwork as somebody who's moving from base to base? And I assume when you're relocated, they don't take into account that you need room for a shop, because all of this stuff. Obviously, you've been here for a while.
Yeah,
but all of this stuff is difficult to move, and it requires setting up. I think when I moved, it took me a year and a half, 2 years to get my shop back in order.
I don't envy whoever has to deal with all of this. My kids, and they don't want to deal with it. They're just intimidated by the thoughts of having to deal with all the tools and equipment that I've got. But when I was being transferred, I would take that table saw apart and put it in all the parts of the legs inside of it, so it didn't take up a lot of space. And when I was in Hawaii, I had a very small little shop, about maybe 3 feet wide and about 8 feet long. It was a little...
a storage unit.
That's exactly what it was, on the front end of the carport, because you don't have garages in Hawaii.
Okay.
And so... and you open up these 2 doors, and that was it. And I made such good use of that little space. And my table saw was out in the carport itself. And fortunately, I didn't have much rust issues, and always took care to keep the table clean and protected. But I've been here for 40 years, and so...
So you retired to San Diego.
I did.
After 20 years in the Navy?
23.
Yeah, 23. And you go to school?
I did. I had a very poor education as a kid, not because of the schools. It was because of me.
Really?
I was a kid in trouble all the time. And fortunately, there was a really wonderful place. I was 14 when the sheriff picked me up off the streets as a runaway. And
14.
I was 14, yeah. And
so at least you got an early start.
I didn't get much of a head start, otherwise the sheriff wouldn't have caught me. But so he gave me an option of going to a reform school for boys or a brand new place called the Good Samaritan Boys Ranch. And I just thought, good sounds better than reform. And I said, I'll go there. And he said, fine, that's where you're going. And so I had every intention of making my escape. I wasn't about to stay anywhere. I was that angry of a kid. And but they had a bunch of cows that had been donated by local farmers. 3 of them were dairy cows. And of course, I was a farm boy, so I knew how to milk cows, take care of cows, and started at a very young age, as a farm boy. And so these 3 dairy cows had calves, and they were sick with what we think of as diarrhea, called scours. And I knew that they were getting way too much milk, because dairy cows give a lot of milk. Beef cows give just the right amount for their calves. So, but nobody on the ranch. I was number 9 boy. There was 8 boys there when I got there, because it had just opened. And nobody knew how to take care of the livestock. And so I separated the calves from their mothers and started hand milking the cows and hand feeding with a bucket, feeding the calves.
Okay.
The calves got better.
Yeah.
And they were able to stop buying milk for us boys to drink, because we had plenty of milk to drink.
And you're 14.
Yeah, and
all
somehow
of a sudden you start taking on this ownership or this
responsibility. And so I forgot to run away. I did.
How long were you there?
I was only there about 7 months, and my older sister...
That's a long time.
Well, I'd have been there until I joined the Navy, but my older sister, nobody knew where I'd been taken. And none of my family was informed of where I had been taken. So, but my sister found out, and she came and convinced me to come live with her and her husband.
Okay.
And that turned out okay. But as soon as I graduated high school, I was in the Navy, and because I still didn't like my home life, and that's boys do that. So joining the Navy was perfect for me. It allowed me to grow up, have objective discipline exercised, if you will. And so because of that, what I consider poor education, when I retired from the Navy, I used my GI Bill to go back to school, and I got my bachelor's and master's degrees at San Diego State in industrial studies, woodworking, metalworking, drawing. And I started my own business in furniture restoration while I was...
Why furniture restoration?
Mechanical. Okay. I just figured I knew I could fix things, and that's what I did, obviously, as a machinist mate in the submarines, and you had to repair, and it just seemed like a good combination. I like to work with wood, and so, and I really learned to enjoy finishing while I was at San Diego State. And Palomar College became aware of my work. I was entering pieces in the Design and Wood Show at the San Diego County Fair. I was president of the San Diego Fine Woodworkers Association by that point. And so I was just really enjoying learning, going back to school, and learning all these new things. And it was really a challenge.
So you move on to teaching at Palomar. You were there for
22 years.
22 years again. Or I mean, you don't go anywhere for just a short stint, do you?
I'm on my 3rd career now. And I hope it lasts long.
What was one of the main challenges of teaching at a school like Palomar, where you've got new students coming in all the time? What was that like?
I had been a teacher in the Navy. I taught on Ford Island in Pearl Harbor. I taught submarine auxiliary equipment. So I had already begun to learn. It was a joy to teach what you knew to others that were going to use this. And when you're teaching fellow submariners, they have to know this. Yeah. And so
I'm sure it's different where it's like, you know this or you might die.
Yes,
compared to you know this or your furniture is going to
Yes, fall apart. But for me, it was no real difference, because when it came to the finishing classes, I felt that it was absolutely important that they know how to finish things correctly, and the hazards of the dangers of oil finishing products and that sort of thing. So to me, it was just as important. Obviously, one is life or death in operating a submarine, but it was still equally important, and had such a good time. And then I took a sabbatical in 2004 to write my book, because I'd been teaching chairs, the ladder back chairs and the Windsor chairs, and my students said, Russ, you need to write a book. We can't remember all that you're telling us.
Yeah.
And they said, so finally I decided to do that. And so in 2004 I wrote that book.
How long did that take? Because I've been thumbing through it, and you've been showing me little bits and pieces here. This is not a book that you just write. You sit down and write one day. You were doing a lot of historical research. You were doing scientific research about moisture moving through wood and all sorts of wood movement issues and things like that. There's a lot of heavy stuff in this book.
There really is. And I sometimes worry that I made it too succinct. I wanted to pare down every unnecessary word so that when you read something, you better read it thoroughly, because it's saying exactly what needs to be said for you to understand how that wood moves, how those tenons have to be made and the rungs orientated.
So when you were making this, or when you were writing this book, you formed a few relationships from that book, where there are bits in the book written by then John Alexander and Roy Underhill.
Great friends. And
that's where you met Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, I really like the history section that I was able to research and come up with. To me, that just feels good when you read that. But I did want to show that there are still people out there keeping these skills alive. And I really wanted people that I knew had good skills and were also interested in preserving those skills and passing them along. And certainly John Alexander, Jenny Alexander later in his life, or her life, was kind of the revivalist of greenwood chair making back in the 70s. Brian Boggs got his book and realized, I can do this. Yeah. And that set him on a whole new course from what he was doing at Brea College at the time. And you can read about him. His first chisel was a sharpened screwdriver, and his steamer was an old hot water heater tank. And so, he made do with what he had there in Brea, Kentucky. I was at his home and where he worked, and it was, you could see the very conservative beginnings in his life. Yeah. And so, and then as I knew Brian. I'd already learned to make the chairs from Brian, and I knew about Roy Underhill, and I knew Roy would write a page in my book. And I had seen articles about President Carter making chairs in Fine Woodworking, and I believe maybe Workbench magazine. And I told my wife, I said, wouldn't it be cool if I could get President Carter to write a page in my book like these others? And she said, oh yeah, just go call up a president. I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. And I called the Carter Center, and they said, well, you don't just call him and talk to him, but you write us a letter and tell us what you want to talk to him about. And so I said, I can do that. And I wrote.
And so this is 2004.
It is. This would have been July of 2004.
So he's already doing incredible work with Habitat, and he was a very busy man. He was not enjoying his retirement, we could say.
Well, he definitely has never rested on his laurels. No. He has always been exceptionally busy. Yeah. And his mind obviously goes a mile a minute because he's always thinking of things that need to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you write him a letter.
I wrote a letter, sent pictures, explained to him that I'm writing this book about making these chairs, and I'd seen pictures of his chairs that he had made and these post and rung ladder backs. And so I knew he would know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so 3 weeks later, they call me and tell me that on this date at this time, you'll have 30 minutes to talk to him. And he never gives anybody 30 minutes, 15, 20 at the most. And so I call him on that date, and he said, "Hello, this is Jimmy Carter." And I said, "This is Russ Filbeck in San Diego." And he said, "I've been so anxious to talk to you." And he said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm kind of nervous." And he said, "You wouldn't be nervous if we were in the wood shop, would you?" I said, "No." And from that minute on, we have this awesome conversation talking about the tools he uses, how he cuts the tree down close to his house and cuts them into short enough lengths so Rosalind can help him drag those pieces into the yard so he can split them. I mean, you don't think of a president and first lady out here cutting
Secret Service agents just watching them cut down these trees.
I know. And so...
somebody like President Jimmy Carter, he likes talking shop too. He does. Like woodworkers are universal. We all like geeking out about this stuff. And it's like, but that is crazy to think that Jimmy Carter could just...
And see, and it was after he left the White House that he taught himself how to build these greenwood chairs based on his grandfather's remnants of chairs that he had made when they settled there in Georgia in the 1830s. So he had some broken chairs that his grandfather had made. And that's what he was working from. And so that's... and he put 4 of those chairs in Sotheby's auction house to raise money to start building the Carter Center after he was president.
Oh, my goodness.
And he had to raise the money to build the Carter Center, and that was his way of start building this seed money that he needed to get it going. And
so now how does he raise money? He calls his buddy Russ.
Yeah. Well, while in our conversation that day, I asked him if he would like to have one of my spoke shaves, and he said yes. And then at the end of our conversation, I asked him, "Would you like to have one of my rocking chairs?" And he said yes. I said, "Walnut or cherry?" He said, "Cherry." And I said, "Okay." I said, "This is July of '04. I said, "I come to Kentucky each summer to harvest hickory bark and logs with Brian Boggs." I said, "I will bring your chair with me next year." So while I'm building his chair, my wife says to me, "You're building this beautiful chair for him. You better do something for his wife." And I said, "What do you think I can make for her?" I said, "How about a set of shaker boxes out of cherry?" She said, "That'll be fine, as long as you don't overlook her." And so I made those, and so the following June of '05, I delivered those to Atlanta while I was back in Kentucky. And he sat down in that chair, and he rubbed it like this, and he looked up at me, and he said, "If you don't mind, I'm going to take this chair home to Plains." And I said, "I don't mind." And so, and it's in his home. I've been there.
Wow.
And it's really nice to see it there. But he went behind his desk and took out several books that he's written. He's written 36 books since he left the White House. But he took out about 3 or 4, maybe 5 of his books and started signing them to me. Mm-hmm. And I get back here to San Diego and read them. And in one of them, he talks about how he makes a piece of furniture each year to go in this fundraising auction that raises money to keep the Carter Center going, because the Carter Center is a separate entity from the Presidential Library and Museum, which is federally maintained.
Okay.
Not the Carter Center. And because the Carter Center is a completely separate entity where he would get heads of state together to solve problems. And he and Rosalind decided that they were going to tackle these awful diseases around the world: guinea worm, river blindness, lymphatic filariasis, onchocerciasis, trachoma, blindness issues. And their success has been phenomenal with how the Carter Center goes into these countries, helps the people to solve the problems for themselves. They don't go in there and just do it for them. They teach them how. All the sanitation and things, building latrines, all of these things that they do is phenomenal. Well, I read that and I called him back. I said, I think if I make a replica of your rocking chair and a replica of Rosalind's shaker boxes and your spoke shave, and I donate them to your auction, I said, I think they'll bring good money. And he said, I agree. So I went to work. I got cherry rocker and the shaker boxes and the spoke shave made. The next auction was February of '06.
Okay.
And so I had them ready and delivered to that auction. And I think the shaker boxes brought $6,000. The rocking chair brought about $6,500. The spoke shave, $1,000. And I thought, man, this is crazy money to me.
Yeah.
And I said, I got to keep doing this. And I haven't stopped.
So it becomes addictive almost. It's like, let's see how.
It's been so wonderful knowing that what I make, other people are willing to spend a lot of money for it. They want to give the money to President Carter, but they genuinely seem to want to bid on the things that I've made. And so
what did the last rocker go for?
I'm sitting in a black acacia rocking chair.
Yeah.
And
how much can I buy this for?
Well, if it were the auction.
yeah. I want to buy. I don't want this to go to the auction.
In the auction, this chair sold for $100,000. And
wow, it's a nice chair. Don't get me wrong.
I know. And I appreciate the families that have enough money to be able to give that kind of money to President Carter. But no, when I build a rocking chair, the cherry one is the easiest to build. Cherry bends nice. It's easy to work. This black acacia is not so much, and this is hard to come by. Where do
you get black acacia?
This is only available locally, and you can't buy it in a lumber yard. It's indigenous just here to Southern California. And I think Catalina Island. So it's just this area that you can get this black acacia. But there's other beautiful exotic woods, that are street ornamental trees that can be made into chairs. And this is just one of them.
So the Carter Foundation is not the only organization that you've been working a lot with.
No, I started working with President and Mrs. Carter, realizing that I could really make a difference. I'll never meet or know the people that are benefiting from what I've helped them, people that all these diseases are being eradicated. There were 3.6 million cases of guinea worm in '82. It's down to 10. There's only 10 cases left, and they have those people isolated. And that'll be only the second disease on Earth to be eradicated. Smallpox is the first one.
Wow.
And so President Carter had cancer just a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it was this very scary time for him. And he said, all I wanted to do was live longer than the last guinea worm. That was his.
Oh, come on.
That was his. That was his feeling, and he's still going strong. 95. He and Rosalind just finished a week of building homes for Habitat outside of Nashville. But as far as what I've been doing, I greatly appreciated what the Good Samaritan Boys Ranch did for me as a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And so it was a few years ago, probably 2010, that I went back and built a really nice shop at the Boys Ranch, which is just north of Springfield, Missouri. And still there. I was number 9 boy. They have 85 boys there all the time. It's unfortunate that we have to have a facility for boys in trouble like that, but they're, at least they are really being given guidance and direction rather than just being in a prison.
So you go up there?
I go there every summer when they get out of school. Now that I have that really nice shop, my friends donated well over $100,000 worth of tools and machines, which I set up in the shop. The ranch director built the building for me so that I would have a place to come and teach the boys woodworking each summer when they get out of school in June.
What kind of projects do you teach them?
Well, certainly I demonstrate turning on the lathe, turning pins, turning tops, but I have the boys make shaker boxes. So
that's a good project.
It is, and I give them a shaker box. I give them a fairly large shaker box so that they can keep a pin that I turn for them, a top that I turn for them, and a little race car that I make for them. And they have a place to keep these things.
Yeah.
And then I have them make one. And while they're making their box, I tell them, you don't get to keep this box. And I get that look like, oh, why not? And I said, because you already have one. I made one for you. You don't need two. I said, what I want you to do with your box that you've made is think of a person that's been kind to you. And I want you to give that to them and thank them. Because, it's probably the first thing they've had to give to someone, and especially to thank someone. So it's my way of teaching them that not everybody in the world is mean. Yeah. And so it's the change in their face when I say that I want you to give it to someone. Yeah. It's from like, why don't I get to keep it? To, oh man, I know just who to give it to. And it may be their therapist. Yeah. If they still have a family, many times it's, oh, I've got to give this to my mom. Yeah. So it makes them stop and think. And so it's a nice way to teach them how to use their hands, to feel that hot wood in their hands as it bends around that form.
Well, a shaker box, it's a project where it's like you're manipulating wood in ways that you wouldn't think you could.
Yeah, we take it right out of the boiling water.
And it's a useful item. And so have you seen some of the boys who take to it quicker than others? Is the fire lighting in some?
Some. Yeah. And there's always those that have so much anger and resentment in their lives that it doesn't come as easy for them. Yeah. Others come to realize that the ranch is there to help them. And I tell them that it's probably the only safe place they'll ever have in all of their lives, where they're not going to be threatened, intimidated, and bullied, because the ranch is very strict about that sort of discipline. And
do they know that you were at the ranch?
Yeah. I let them know that, because they will try to test their limits against me a little bit, and I will let them know that I was number 9 boy, and so I still think exactly like you are thinking. Yeah. And that sets them back a little bit. Their eyes brighten up, and then they pay attention after that.
Well, I mean, just the idea, number 9 went on to spend 20 some odd years in the Navy and teach at a college for 20 years. And I mean, it's at least to some, it's got to be pretty inspiring to see.
Heck, it just gave me chills just thinking about it.
Yeah, because it's like you did it.
Yeah,
and you did it, and you're helping other people do it.
When you go back and stop and think a little bit about that, I always felt like I was just a tumbleweed being blown by the wind, you know, and wherever I landed, I just took hold with whatever I was doing. And so I never felt I really had much direction in life, but now it's a little different. I really feel like there's a word for people that give and do stuff. I can't think of the word right at the moment, but philanthropic, is that it?
Okay, yeah.
Where I'm able, now at this point in my life, I'm able to help President and Mrs. Carter, able to help these boys. You know, one is an international thing, one is right here, grassroots, at home.
Yeah, so one, you're working with the actual people you're helping.
Yeah.
And one, you're just helping someone raise money. Not just, I shouldn't use that word, but you know, you're firing on all cylinders though.
It's been a fabulous journey.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, my wife's been just awesome.
I was going to say, in every single one of these little stories,
yeah,
she kind of nudged you in the right direction. 52 years.
Yeah, 52 years. And while I was in the Navy, when I made Chief Petty Officer, she made Senior Chief. So it was, and then she didn't hesitate to let me know that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a great, rewarding marriage, family.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us into your shop and sitting down talking. We made a couple of videos on some of the techniques you use, and those will be up on the website, of course. And your shop is incredible. It didn't totally make sense to me until you told me that submariners make use of every cubic inch.
Yes.
And I realized that there's just layers upon layers of things in the shop that most people would need a shop 5 times the size for. It's a wonderful shop, a beautiful place to work here in San Diego, of course. But Russ, thank you so much for having us.
My pleasure.